Hey everyone, today we got confirmation that Auron is coming to FFBE Global, and because I don't really want to make an hour-long video on Auron's review, I decided to extract a certain bit from my review into this separate video, which I can already do today because we know that Auron is exactly a carbon copy on global as he is from JP. So in this video today, I will talk about how does Auron compare to Sephiroth, because this is one of the questions a lot of people are going to ask themselves, or us content creators, Sinsar, Wanderer and me, most likely, in the next coming days. So yeah, today let's check out Auron versus Sephiroth. Let's go. First thing I do want to mention, and this is also one of the very important parts, is build flexibility, because as you might know, Auron is not a brave shift unit, he is strictly super limit burst, meaning he only has one form to deal with, whereas Sephiroth, he has two, and you can do pretty much whatever with the base form, but the brave shift is where it's at for damage. So a few key factors you can see, right? So both these builds, they include maxed LB, maxed attack percent, maxed true double hand, and 6x cap. Now, however you do, this is one of the most ideal ways to do this. Sephiroth, believing until the end is not necessarily needed. You could also use Eunice STMR. It highly depends on what you're building towards, but these are just examples of how to do this. But in any case, Auron has, technically speaking, more room for killers than Sephiroth, because he only needs one less slot than Sephiroth does. So another thing is Sephiroth has maxed Reaper by default, which Auron does not, neither for plant nor for fairy, even when he's wearing his own vision card. Auron also has 0 evasion, whereas Sephiroth has baseline 30%, which is very good for things such as Clash of Wills, for example, where you sometimes need 50% and the rest of it comes from 50% accuracy down via Sky. So yeah, that's another advantage. Auron does not have guts, but Sephiroth does from his TMR. Auron needs 3 or 4 or 5 turns to fire off his best ability, depending on your EX level for his super limit burst. Whereas Sephiroth, he needs to stack, yes, but you stack once, you do his grounders, and on turn 3, you're getting the maximum amount of damage, technically speaking. So in either case, Sephiroth and Auron at EX plus 3 will fire off their best ability at turn 3. However, Sephiroth, because he's more self-sufficient than Auron, will deal more damage. The reason is fairly simple: 280% attack buff, 200% LB buff on Auron for his Grandis, which nobody knows why. Whereas Sephiroth has 300 attack buff and a 250 LB buff on his Grandis. And another key fact, Auron is wind-locked, Sephiroth is dark-locked, but we know from the past 4 months to 6 months of using Sephiroth, having a dark lock means nothing, literally nothing. So let's do a strength and weakness check for Auron first, and we're also going to do the same for Sephiroth, obviously. So the strengths: he's very flexible regarding gearing choices, as you've seen. He has a lot of free materia slots. He has super high damage potential, and it is on par with Sephiroth. That I can already tell you. And he's a good choice for dual race bosses, with a caveat. And that is, if resistances are needed, he will struggle infinitely more than Sephiroth, because he only has that one form to play with. Whereas Sephiroth, you put him into base, slap a lot of resistance gear, passive evasion provoke if you want to, and you'll be good to go. And that's fine. You don't have that luxury, especially against dual race bosses with Auron. And dual race bosses is what is coming up next. Every single Dark Visions and Vision World and Clash of Worlds always had dual races, will have dual races. So this is one of the disadvantages of Auron if you need resistances. Whoo boy, is Auron gonna struggle. Anyway, weaknesses. Auron has to sacrifice raw attack, and that means damage, for shenanigans such as provoke or evasion or resistance builds. If you need it, Auron's gonna have a bad time. He has no Brave Shift to counter the above, and very bad self-sufficiency. He has a 280 attack buff, 200 LB buff, and neither gets upgraded by the SLB. The SLB buffs are 250% attack, which is laughable, and also only 200% LB buff. So I don't even know why SLB buffs, when they become active, are only 250 and not 300% attack buff and 250% LB buff, but this is what we have to deal with, I guess. So yeah, Auron also wants an old unit on the team, Ferris, for the field effect to deal even more damage. And he's only really good at EX plus 3. Same reason as with Sephiroth, if he's below EX plus 3, he doesn't get the static attack. You don't get the vision card, sorry. And it just adds so much, especially in terms of raw attack and static attack. It's just too good to pass up on. And due to all of the above, he is almost unusable in Clash of Worlds, unless you go for a weird turn 3 kill with him, but chances are this won't work. We've seen with my quick clear of Threshen that it took me 2 turns. You can't do that with Auron, for example. No way, Jose. So yeah, Sephiroth. I think we all know the strengths and weaknesses of Sephiroth by now. One of the strengths can be used in many ways. Passive provoke evasion, for example, resistance builds. He's still highly flexible due to gearing, in-gearing due to the Brave Shift. Mildly flexible for killers, especially when it comes to dual races. He's struggling a little bit. But yeah, for the most cases, he's fine. Innate evasion gives him a pass in Clash, as we've seen multiple times already. And just like Auron, he has super high damage. He is still the best physical DPS in the game. And if you take out Angela, he's still the best by a huge margin. Now the weaknesses: to gain the maximum amount of damage out of Sephiroth, you need either Reese, who is a time limited and technically speaking a bad unit, or you need Yuna, who is A, premium, and B, a bad unit in general, on the team. And Yuna is a light locked evoker, meaning making things even worse. So technically speaking, everyone who pulled on Reese, congratulations, you won the lottery here. I do have slight regrets not going for Reese. Yeah, hindsight is king, right? Anyway. So yeah, that is one of the greater weaknesses of Sephiroth. I mean, it's just as bad as going for Ferris on a win team. But the Ferris team has one upside. If you're going for Ferris build, your whole team is going to be wind, and that's not an issue. Whereas Sephiroth, you have that funky light evoker on your team that probably won't be any help for the team. In terms of damage, that is. So yeah, that's kind of weird. Anyway, another weakness of Sephiroth is that his best in slot weapon, the Masamune, is a time limited weapon. So that is really bad for everyone who was not playing at the time of his event and didn't get the weapon. That's bad. And yeah, like I said, when it comes to dual race bosses, depending on the race combination, he is struggling a lot. And he too is only really good at EX plus 3. And now let's get to the nitty gritty stuff. I think everyone who's watching this video wants to see numbers. So this is what we're going to do now. We're going for example builds, taking a Beast Dragon boss. Neither of these two units are particularly good against Beast Dragons, so let's try this out, right? So these are example builds. Now I know I can already see someone pointing out, why are you using Auron's own vision card? You could have used Tifa's vision card. Yes, I am doing that too, don't worry. It's on another slide. But this example build with Auron's own vision card puts both at roughly the same, with the difference that Auron only has 225 Beast, 250 Dragon, whereas Seph has both 250. So both are struggling to reach that 300%. And this is optimized on the builder itself, by the way. So keep that in mind, this is not a build that I threw together, this is strictly the builder. The only things I gave the builder to keep locked are Weapon, Crown, STMR on Auron, Guardian of Light Riku. Those are the things I kept in lock. Same for Seph, Weapon, Crown, Master of Fate, and his own STMR are locked. Everything else was unlocked for the builder. Alright, so let's compare the damage. So, unsurprisingly, due to the higher killer amount and generally speaking higher self buffs, Sephiroth wins. And Sephiroth wins not by a huge margin, to be fair, but it's still a noticeable difference. So a few notes: 22.5k defense boost, 90% breaks. We're using DV field amps, but no field amplifications from Faris Yuna, for example. And Auron again suffers from using his own vision card. However, Tifa's vision card will only increase max and average variance by 0.4%, or in absolute numbers 14 million are added on top. This will be fixed for the next comparison, but like I said, the difference is minimal between Auron's and Tifa's vision card. And now let's take a look at the same thing, but with full support, meaning 400% attack buff, 300% LB buff. Let's take a look. So full support, this is still not accounting, and we will never account for field effects for one reason and one reason only. Sephiroth would win for the 30% Dark Amp, whereas Faris only has 25%. So I think it's important to keep in mind that Sephiroth, technically speaking, would have the upper hand here. But just a rather side note. So full support, Auron is ahead, 5.64% of Sephiroth. And that should not come as a surprise. He is using A, Tifa's card, and B, he's using Huntsman, the Huntsman version of the Clash of Wills clothes for this. And the Huntsman clothes, they also have 120 attack. Compare this to Infernal Fire Reign's Super Trustmaster, which is more realistic because, truth be told, most of you, I would say 99% of people, have the chain cap clothes. And switching around to the Huntsman clothes is a bad idea because it costs a lot of Xenostone shards, and you want to hoard Xenostone shards for whatever's coming up in Season 3, and you kind of probably most likely want to have the new shiny item from Clash of Wills Season 3 anyway. So when we are using Infernal Fire Reign's STMR, which is an equal amount of killers, both are 50% beast killer, Sephiroth is ahead again, only by a very, very tiny amount. So Auron is 98.98% of Seph's damage. This is still pretty good, but we still have to consider Sephiroth is at least 4 months old at this point. I believe Sinsar said in his news video that Sephiroth is already 6 months old, which, wow, time flies, really, if that's the case. I haven't checked, but wow. And now, let's take a look, which is also something that you might be interested in, is best case scenario. Meaning building towards Fairy Plant for Auron and Human Reaper for Sephiroth. So those are exemplary builds, and this time around I used the Magister Celestite Regalia on Auron because it makes sense, right? There is no need to put anything else on it. So the Magister Celestite Regalia is fine. I could have gone for the Summoner Vest here, just because all it costs is one Faceted Orb, and I personally, I have almost 60 Transcension Pearls, so I could do this on paper, but I wouldn't. And if I don't, most people also don't want to unless you're Superman maxing. But yeah, let's take it as it is for now. This is the best case scenario. Auron has a little bit more attack, and knowing math, knowing that both are equal, it shouldn't come as a surprise that Auron comes out on top. Because when you streamline attack buffs, streamline LB buffs, streamline killer buffs, at the end of the day, it's the attack stat that matters, and having higher attack means dealing more damage. So unsurprisingly, Auron is 8.7% ahead. This goes up to 9% if you include the Summoner's version of the Clash Clothes, but that's about it. So yeah, the one reason, the attack clothes versus 80 for Seph. The other is that Auron can use 2 Esper stat increase materia, whereas Seph only can use 1. If you were able to use 2 Esper stat increase materials on Sephiroth, things would be even closer. But as a matter of fact, it is not possible for the most part. So Auron, in a best case scenario, is slightly ahead of Sephiroth. So let's come to a verdict, right? And this one, I cannot give you a clear-cut answer who's the better unit. Both are super good, super strong. Auron is equally as good as Sephiroth in terms of raw damage output, when ignoring things such as resistances or evasion. And this is the one thing that I want you guys to keep in mind whenever you decide or are thinking about pulling for Auron. Step back, pause with an E at the end, and think about where you want to use him. Is it Dark Visions, where you most of the time are going to face dual race bosses and want some resistances on your team? Auron might struggle depending on the enemy type. So keep that in mind. Whereas Sephiroth will not struggle, you can just shift him back to base and he'll be Gucci. In specific cases, again, ignoring boss mechanics, he will outperform, Auron that is, will outperform Sephiroth by up to 9%. But with all things considered, Sephiroth is still the better pick in most cases, as he's more flexible to use, just because he has two forms, the base and the brave. Another thing I'd like to point out is that Auron's viability highly depends on EX levels, more so than it does for Sephiroth, because the SLB of Auron is tied to the EX level. And his regular limit burst is just plain bad compared to other LBs. So in a worst case scenario, you're waiting until turn 5 to burst with Auron. Whereas Sephiroth, you are guaranteed to LB for max value on turn 3. Turn 1, LB, turn 2, Grandis, turn 3, LB, done. Nothing will survive. So yeah, in short, there's no clear-cut winner for this in Dark Visions or Vision World, because it highly depends on what kind of boss you're fighting and what the races of this final boss are. In Clash of Wills, however, Auron will most likely see zero play, whereas Sephiroth was brought to fights and will continue to see use just because he's A, dealing a lot of damage without much setup, and B, he's just that good for the Brave Shift availability. And that is it. I hope you enjoyed this. My review will now only really basically touch upon his damage against most likely a demon boss, so single race, as I've always done, fairness to all. But yeah, I wanted to decouple this. As you've seen, this video is about 18 minutes long. It made absolutely sense to do this on its own and not include this in the review, because the review would have been about an hour with this included. Alright, so thank you all for watching. Have a wonderful rest of the Tuesday, evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you're from. See you Thursday, and bye bye.